Today, we will journey deep into the centuries, to a time when mysterious and warlike horsemen ruled the lands of modern Ukraine, specifically the northern Black Sea coast. The Cimmerians, a people whose fame echoed from the Black Sea steppes all the way to Western Asia. In this video, we will try to unravel the Cimmerian Problem, delve into their material culture, explore their military campaigns, and find out what role they played in the ancient history of humanity. The Cimmerians are the most ancient people whose name is recorded in written sources on the territory of modern Ukraine. Their historical activity mainly falls between the 9th and 7th centuries BC, a period marking the transition from the Bronze to the Iron Age in the northern Black Sea region. Leaving no written records of their own, the Cimmerians appear to us from cuneiform texts, particularly the royal annals and correspondence from the times of Sargon II, Esarhaddon, and Ashurbanipal. These texts contain references to the Cimmerians under the name Gimmeria or Gimmeria, and are crucial for understanding their military actions and identifying certain chieftains. The works of Greco-Roman authors are also very important to us. Thus, the oldest information about the Cimmerians is found in the epic poems of Homer. In the Odyssey, dated to the 8th century BC, describing the northern coast of the Black Sea, Homer writes, "There the Cimmerians live, and their city, and their whole realm are forever wrapped in clouds and fog, for the bright sun never looks upon that land with its hot rays." And this is the oldest specifically written fixation of the name of the people associated with these lands. The Greek historian Herodotus, writing in the 5th century BC, also provided valuable information about the Cimmerians, particularly regarding their wars with the Scythians and subsequent migrations. Thus, he wrote that the country where the Scythians now live was in ancient times Cimmerian. Even now in Scythia there exist Cimmerian fortresses, Cimmerian river crossings. There is also a country called Cimmeria, and there is the so-called Cimmerian Bosporus. These sources testify to the significant military might of the Cimmerians and their geopolitical influence, which extended far beyond the northern Black Sea region. But how did the Cimmerians appear on the lands of modern Ukraine? What is the Cimmerian problem? The answers are ahead in the video. Despite being mentioned in authoritative ancient and Eastern sources, the study of the Cimmerians is fraught with significant difficulties. So great that in scientific literature these difficulties have even earned the name the Cimmerian Problem. One of the main components of this problem is the Cimmerians' lack of their own writing system, which forces researchers to rely on external, often fragmentary and biased testimonies. Regarding the archaeological sites associated with the Cimmerians, they are mainly represented by kurgan burials, which complicates the reconstruction of their daily life and the complete picture of their material culture. The Cimmerian problem is a consequence of this discrepancy between historical accounts of a powerful and warlike people and the difficulty of unambiguously identifying their archaeological sites, especially against the backdrop of cultural layering and mutual influences with other communities of that time on the territory of modern Ukraine. The Blazerka, Srubnaya or Timbergrave, Chernolis, and later the early Scythian cultures. Because of this, it is difficult to give an exact answer to the question of the Cimmerians' origins. Today, there is a fairly strong tendency to search for the local roots of Cimmerian culture. And it suggests that the Cimmerian culture did not come from somewhere far away, but formed here, locally, in the steppes of the northern Black Sea region. Ukrainian historian Serhiy Makortik suggests that the Cimmerians and their culture mostly formed on the basis of the preceding Blazerka and Srubnaya cultures, which already existed in these territories during the Bronze Age. That is, it was a gradual development of the local population, which under the influence of climate change, transitioned from a sedentary to a nomadic lifestyle. And this is exactly what led to the emergence of what we now call the Cimmerian culture. Of course, this does not mean there were no external influences. The Cimmerians actively contacted their neighbors, particularly the populations of the Caucasus, Central Europe, and the civilizations of the ancient Near East. These contacts influenced their culture, weapons, and art. But, according to Makortik, the core of the culture was local. This theory is also supported by ancient DNA research. A central article titled "Ancient Genomes Suggest the Eastern Pontic-Caspian Steppe as the Source of Western Iron Age Nomads" highlights a 2018 study where scientists sequenced the genomes of 35 ancient individuals, including Cimmerians, Scythians, and Sarmatians, from the Bronze to the Iron Age. The study proved that the Cimmerians were not genetically homogeneous. They shared a common genetic base with previous local cultures, and the Shrubnaya culture in particular. Opposing this version is the migration theory. A significant portion of researchers leans towards the idea that the Cimmerians came to the Black Sea steppes from more eastern regions, most often naming the lower Volga region as their ancestral homeland. This migration, according to various estimates, could have occurred in the 8th century BC or even earlier, around 1500 BC. Currently, it is impossible to definitively confirm or deny these versions, so let everyone choose the one they like best, and I will continue. Two main groups of Cimmerians of that time can be distinguished. The Kornahorivka group, whose burial traditions were similar to those already existing between the Danube and the Dniester rivers, as well as in the Dnieper region. People there were buried in kurgans in a flexed position, and this method of burial resembles those of the Yamnaya culture. In contrast to them were the Novocherkassk group, whose traditions are closely tied to the southern Bug region and the Dnieper basin, and who buried their dead in an extended supine position. Regarding their social structure among the Cimmerians, as with almost all nomads, families were likely united into family kinship groups of closely related families, whose cores were the closest blood relatives. These groups formed a community consisting of 2 to 5 families. Several such communities could unite into a larger society for joint nomadic migrations. Wealthy livestock owners also stood out, possessing military detachments to expand their influence and power. Whenever and however the Cimmerians appeared, they did not develop in a vacuum, but were surrounded by equally interesting cultures. First of all, the Belozerka, and specifically the Chernolis cultures, should be highlighted. The geographical location of the Belozerkans and Cimmerians in the open steppe, and the Chernolesians in the forest steppe, laid the foundation for dynamic interaction driven by different economic strategies and resource needs. Steppe cultures were predominantly pastoralist, often mobile, whereas the Chernolis culture was agricultural, with fortified settlements. An interesting site in this context is the Wild Garden, fortified settlement on the territory of modern Mykolaiv, which is sometimes conditionally called the City of the Cimmerian People. It dates to 1250, 925 BC, and belongs to the Belozerka culture, which chronologically preceded the classical Cimmerian period. This settlement may reflect the cultural substrate upon which the Cimmerian community later partially formed, or perhaps its early stage. The main source for studying the material culture of the Cimmerians is their burials. The sites are predominantly represented by burials made into already existing kurgan mounds from previous eras, or in small kurgans of their own. Today, over 100 such burials are known on the territory of Ukraine. The burial goods are quite distinctive. In male burials, weapons are usually found: iron swords, bronze, iron and bone arrowheads, and elements of horse gear. Female burials are accompanied by jewelry such as gold and bronze tubular beads, regular beads, and clay pottery. An important feature of Cimmerian burials is the erection of stone stela, sometimes roughly shaped into a human figure, which likely symbolized a deceased warrior or chieftain. One of the most famous and richest Cimmerian burials is considered to be the Vysoka Mohyla kurgan, located near the village of Balki in the Vasilivka district of the Zaporizhia region. Among the items found there, special attention should be given to a short iron sword and a kynix, bronze daggers, clay pottery, and horse harness. The weapons indicate that the Cimmerians were skilled metallurgists who not only continued the traditions of bronze working, but also became among the first in the northern Black Sea region to master the production and processing of iron. However, despite settlements of the wild garden type, the Cimmerians were primarily nomads, meaning they were characterized by both large-scale migrations and military campaigns. As a nomadic people specializing in pastoralism, especially the breeding of horses that formed the basis of their army, the Cimmerians constantly required vast and high-quality pastures. Changing climate conditions, specifically a cooling and increased aridity in the steppes of Central Asia at the beginning of the first millennium BC, could have been a general stimulus for the westward migration of nomadic groups in search of better living and economic conditions. Scientists also named the Scythians, who were already beginning to press the Cimmerians from the east, as one of the reasons for these migrations. The military-political situation in the Near East in the 8th, 7th centuries BC also facilitated Cimmerian activity. The region was an arena of constant rivalry between major powers such as Assyria, Urartu, Elam, and numerous smaller kingdoms of Anatolia and Syria. This political fragmentation and frequent conflicts created a window of opportunity for mobile and well-armed military groups like the Cimmerians. They could act as an independent force, exploiting the weaknesses of local rulers, or enter into temporary alliances and serve as mercenaries. Thus, the migrations and military campaigns of the Cimmerians should be viewed not as a single event caused by a single factor, but as a complex process driven by a combination of push factors, such as Scythian expansion, and pull factors, such as the availability of unprotected or weakened territories of sedentary civilizations. Therefore, the movement of the Cimmerians should be seen as part of a much broader process of westward migration of Central Asian Iranian-speaking nomads towards southeastern and Central Europe, which lasted throughout the entire first millennium BC. Other Iranian-speaking nomadic peoples, such as the Scythians and Sarmatians, later followed the Cimmerians. Consequently, their campaigns were not a unique phenomenon, but rather one of the vivid manifestations of the general dynamic of interaction between the nomadic steppe and the sedentary civilizations of Eurasia at that time. The Assyrians, who called the Cimmerians Gimmeria or Gimmeria, left some of the earliest and most detailed accounts of their military actions in Western Asia. These records, primarily royal annals, although often propagandistic in nature, are exceedingly valuable for reconstructing events. Thus, during the reign of Sargon II, the Cimmerians first appear in Assyrian documents. They are recorded on the northern borders of the Assyrian Empire, in the Manayan region of Ushtish, southeast of Lake Urmia. Assyrian letters of that period indicate that the Cimmerians were enlisted into the Assyrian army by Sargon and formed a garrison in Ushtish, which Sargon had previously recaptured from Urartu. These Cimmerian units took part in combat operations against the Urartian king Rusa I when he attempted to reclaim the lost territories. Later, reinforced by Assyrian troops under the command of Sennacherib, they dealt a decisive defeat to Rusa at Mount Uaush, which is considered one of the reasons for Rusa's suicide and the subsequent decline of the kingdom of Urartu itself. Under the next ruler of Assyria, Esarhaddon, the Assyrians and Cimmerians were no longer allies but at war. In his annals, Esarhaddon reports a victory over the Cimmerian chieftain Tushpa and his army in the land of Hubushna around 679 BC. Tushpa the Cimmerian, a nomad, together with his whole army I crushed in the land of Hubushna. Him and his warriors I destroyed with the sword. During the reign of Ashurbanipal, the Cimmerians continued to be a significant force. Assyrian sources detail complex relations with Lydia and its king Gaius in the context of the Cimmerian threat. Ashurbanipal recounts how Gaius initially turned to him for help against the Cimmerians who were terrorizing his country, and after the Cimmerians retreated, betrayed him for an alliance with Egypt. Ultimately, when the Cimmerians returned under the leadership of their powerful king Dugdam, Assyria did not come to the rescue. The Cimmerians managed not only to defeat the Lydian army and kill Gaius, but also to capture and sack the capital of Lydia entirely. Assyrian sources call Dugdam the king of the Uman Manda, or king of the Saka and Gutian people. And in one astrological report, he even figures as the king of the universe, which may testify to his immense power and influence. Ashurbanipal claims that Dugdam was eventually punished by the gods and died of an illness around 7th century BC. Dugdam's successor was his son Sandakshatru, who continued hostile actions against Assyria, particularly from the territory of Cilicia. However, according to Assyrian sources, Ashurbanipal defeated him as well. After this, mentions of the Cimmerians as a significant military threat gradually disappear from Assyrian records. Assyrian sources, while glorifying the victories of their own kings, reveal a complex dynamic of relations with the Cimmerians. They were not simply marauding barbarians, but political actors. The fact that Assyrian rulers devoted significant attention to the Cimmerians in their annals attests to the seriousness of the threat they posed. In the 7th century BC, the Cimmerians disappear from the political map of the world, having failed to establish a foothold in Asia Minor. They would also be displaced or assimilated by the Scythians in the northern Black Sea region. Herodotus details this in his Histories. When the Scythians approached, the Cimmerians began to take counsel, for a great army was advancing. and their opinions were divided. The people were for retreating, but the kings insisted on fighting for their country to the last. Thus, the Cimmerians divided into two equal parts and began to fight among themselves. And all those who died at each other's hands, the Cimmerian people buried near the river Tirus, and their tomb is still visible today. Having buried them, they left the country, and the Scythians, arriving, occupied the deserted lands. Despite being ultimately displaced or assimilated by the Scythians, their presence did not pass without a trace. The memory of them was preserved in classical toponymy, for example, the Cimmerian Bosporus, and their culture became one of the components in shaping the subsequent ethno-cultural landscape of the region. The Cimmerians, being the first-named people on the territory of Ukraine, play an important role in shaping historical consciousness. They symbolize the deep antiquity of the settlement of Ukrainian lands, becoming a sort of starting point for the written history of the region. And although scholars rightly caution against searching for direct ethnic continuity between ancient peoples and modern nations, the very fact of the prolonged presence and study of communities like the Cimmerians is important for constructing a narrative of the continuity of the historical process. Thank you for watching this video to the end. If you liked it, subscribe to the channel. Good night and good luck.